Are you gonna let me do this, or are you gonna sabotage everything I've worked so hard to accumulate?
So hard?
My 13 subscribers.
Yeah.
So here we are back at the Buddy Boy YouTube channel, and you know, my last video was a big hit. It got 73 freaking views. Woo! And I figured now that I'm officially a YouTuber, I'm gonna do what every YouTuber does, and that is a tier list. I suck at editing, okay? I don't want to edit freaking moving images. What do I look like? What do I look like? A YouTuber? No. So I made a physical version, and we're just gonna be rolling with that today, okay? Get over it. So I figured I wanted to follow up, you know, my last review of a foreign black and white French film with something a little bit more casual, something for, you know, the more American general masses. And I just picked the perfect freaking franchise to go with today. So I decided to talk about Mission Impossible, baby. Mission Impossible is a series that I've been attached with for about as long as I can remember. I remember we owned 3 classic DVDs, Mission Impossible 1, Mission Impossible 2, and Mission Impossible freaking 3.
Right after 2.
Yeah, baby, I watched those flipping...
Fuck yeah, baby.
I was watching those dang movies almost every other day, okay? If you're some kind of Luddite who's never seen Mission Impossible, let me give you a little bit of context, all right? Let me just clue you in a little bit. Yes, I said Luddite. Anyways, if you're a freaking Luddite, aka someone who's been living under a rock, and you've never seen the Mission Impossible franchise, let me just give you a little bit of a rundown. It centers around this guy, okay, portrayed by the ever psychopathic Tom Cruise.
I mean, if you're a Scientologist, you see life, you see things the way they are.
In all its glory, you know, all of its complexity.
So, like, have you met an SP?
Named Ethan Hunt. This guy's a flippin', kickin', rockin' badass. Okay, he's a spy. He's a ladies man. He's a bit of a ladies man. He has a lot of tools at his disposal, and his job every movie is to do some crazy shit and save the world. That's essentially the point of the franchise. Now, if you didn't know, Mission Impossible, the franchise, was actually based on some freaking old dumb boomer TV show, but nowadays it's a little bit more epic, okay? It's a little bit more cool, okay? You got spy technology, you've got disguises and masks, you've got so much freaking cool stunt work, so much freaking cool car chases. There's so much cool shit in these movies. Some of these movies are better than others. So it's my job today to see how they stack up on my beautiful...
Quite literally.
Starting with the one that started it all, baby. We're talking about Mission Impossible. No number, no subheading. This is the first one. All right, so Steven just crunched the numbers for me. It turns out this bangin' movie came out in the year of 1996. This is a pretty good one, I will say. You know, it set the bar for the franchise, and it has been endlessly parodied, endlessly referenced throughout pop culture. Obviously, the scene where he's in the room and he's doing this. And this movie, without this movie, you know, we wouldn't have the franchise. I wouldn't be here talking about bullshit on this YouTube channel to begin with. So it's obviously very important, but how does it hold up today? That's the question. Where will it land on the list? It has a certain level of restraint that none of the other movies in the franchise have. You know, I think that the film both is benefited by this and harmed by this, because on one hand, the movie has a very distinct sort of style and tone to it, but on the other hand, you don't get Tom Cruise freaking hanging off of a helicopter about to lose his life, literally and within the movie. So it doesn't quite reach the cinematic and explosive heights of the other ones, but, you know, it is unique and it is enjoyable in its own right.
Woo! Give it up. Give it up in the comments section.
Hey, I'm not done. I still got more to say. You know, when I was a kid rewatching these Mission Impossible DVDs, I probably visited this one the least, if I'm being honest here. But, you know, it could have just been my dumb baby, you know, stupid kid goblin brain. but it just didn't quite catch me as much as the later two in the sort of original trilogy of the Mission Impossible franchise. Another reason for this could have been Brian De Palma's directing. His directing is very focused on Dutch angles and very close, sweaty shots of the characters, being intense and being like, oh frick, oh man, are we gonna be able to do this impossible mission? I think this directing is good in its own right, but I don't think it quite fits with the tone and the source material and the script of the movie. It's almost as if the directing is taking the material more seriously than the material takes itself, which is really weird, because you have this narrative where you have sort of really kind of dumb, schlocky spies plots happening, but then you have this very serious and paranoid, intense direction. And for me, nowadays, that those two don't quite fit as well. I think that the new direction that the series has gone in quite better fits the sort of more schlocky, but still engaging and thrilling aspects of these sort of spy movies. Getting into more specific details of the movie, I like how they trick you into thinking Emilio Estevez is going to be a more serious character in the intro and sort of the opening stinger. They sort of prime the audience to expect to see his face throughout the movie, and then he just gets killed off like way early, and I thought that was pretty epic because I was like, oh wow, there's stakes to this story. People can die, and frick, dude. That's serious business. That's an impossible mission right there. Digging into the one scene that made this movie what it is today, the Langley heist, it's freaking perfect. I just gotta say, they set up these very extreme circumstances that these characters have to do like literally an impossible heist, and when they're going into it, there's these variables that they couldn't account for that end up making the mission or the heist incredibly nail-biting. Tom Cruise catches his sweat is like, bruh, like that was such a cool moment, and it's so simple, but it's still so effective. And I think that some of the movies have sort of almost gotten to the point where they've matched this, but this is still easily the best scene in the franchise. But, getting into more stuff that didn't work for me, the twist villain angle just didn't quite catch me in this movie. The way they reveal the twist is sort of convoluted. They reveal it like twice. Once just from Tom Cruise's sort of brain perspective, him sort of putting the pieces together, and then they do a final confirmation of like, this is what's happening. But the way it ends up as a viewer is you're not quite sure the first time, and by the second time it's incredibly redundant. And then the movie ends on this big explosive train set piece, which did not work for me. For one, the effects are incredibly dated, and it's hard to hold that against the movie, but you also watch other movies that were coming out around the time, and they just seem so much more cinematic and climactic. It could just be the effects, but it also just could be the overall way the scene is presented with the special effects. I think more could have been done to sort of integrate the effects better, or shoot it so that it didn't have to be so reliant on effects, or they could have just chose a different way for the movie to go down that maybe fit the tone of the more paranoid, serious elements of the script. The ending of a movie is really important because that's where they're giving you the last impression, and when your last impression is sort of a dated, cringy, just sort of dumb scene, it sort of permeates throughout the entire movie. So I don't know if I'm being unfair here, but this movie just doesn't quite work as well for me. I do appreciate that it set the bar for the franchise and established it as a very, very important piece of American cinema, but at the same time, I am not going to visit this anytime soon. So for that, I am putting this one in the C tier. Ooh,
that's pretty low.
The C tier. So yeah, I would say middle of the road, set the bar for the franchise, good place to start, but there's room to improve and room to decline. Wait, I have some final closing thoughts on Mission Impossible 1, okay? These are more funny. Emilio Estevez's character is sort of presented as like the tech sort of like guy at the computer almost position, and he's having this conversation with Tom Cruise, and he's giving him this explosive, and he says the line, "Hasta lasagna, don't get any on ya," and I want to bring that back. I think we should make that a catchphrase. Another thing I really like is the fish tank scene. where he essentially just blows it up. No, do you remember the scene? It's like he's literally in this restaurant that's almost entirely made out of like fish tanks, and he blows it up, and then just a shot of him running away, and it's just millions of fish, just like, it was probably fake, but PETA, get on that. This IMF leader who's sort of hunting down Ethan throughout the story, every line delivery from him is so funny. He says everything in this very intense way. He's like, we have to get Ethan Hunt.
All right, Hunt. Enough is enough. You have bribed, cajoled, and killed, and you have done it using loyalties on the inside. You want to shake hands with the devil, that's fine with me. I just want to make sure that you do it in hell.
That was just gold performance from him. Tom Cruise's performance in this movie is also pretty epic, I'd say. He has this scene where he's interacting with the guy who plays Leon the professional, and he's doing like a magic trick with him. One of the best lines in the entire franchise is when Tom Cruise is trying to convince Luther, this sort of hacking character, to join him on this Langley heist. Tom Cruise essentially says, "This is the Mount Everest of hacks." If you watch any media from the late 90s to the early 2000s and you just listen to them talk about technology, any kind of hacking terminology, any mainframes, we gotta shut down the firewall, and we gotta hack into the mainframe. I just love that kind of talk. It just gives me so much nostalgia. Yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about the old Mission Impossible 1.
That was so much talking for one movie. You have to go through 6 more?
There's less talking for the later movies. Number 2, I've got a few words for that one though. MI2, or Mission Impossible 2, was released in the year of our Lord. It's the year of our Lord 2000.
Lord is the current year.
Listen,
What's the year of our Lord? That's the year we're in right now.
if we were in a year blessed by the Lord, Limp Bizkit would be making new music, okay? Which ties into this next movie, because Mission Impossible 2 is the most hard freaking core movie there is in the Mission Impossible franchise, that is. Because you can even just tell by this cover. Okay, look at that. Tom Cruise, he's going freaking sicko mode in this movie, and he is ready to kick some ass in this movie, and I'm ready to kick some ass talking about this movie, okay? I'm just gonna give you a little spoiler warning here. This is the only movie to move all the way up to the Scientology tier, baby. Let's freaking go. Directed by the master of dumb action movies, John freaking Woo! That was kind of loud, but deserved. This film is objectively the worst in terms of overall quality, in terms of filmmaking, in terms of actual expertise, but in terms of high octane thrill freaking rides, this one's unbeaten. The writing is garbage, both from a character and a narrative perspective. Ethan Hunt's love for the sort of love interest of this movie is just really important for the audience's overall engagement with the film, but they met like within the span of 2 days and they already love each other. So there's already not much investing the audience into the actual nitty-gritty of the plot. What do they know about each other? You know, how much could they possibly be attached to each other? It's insane. The spy and the espionage elements of the film are heavily built on this romance as well, which means there ends up being scene of 3 characters watching this girl kiss a guy from satellite technology, and that's supposed to be like investing and very riveting cinema. And in actuality, it's actually just pretty funny. This isn't about characters and people and romance and humanity. This is about things blowing up. This is about things going crazy, and this is about impossible missions, okay? And this movie absolutely delivers on those fronts, let me tell you. To be fair, I might be biased in my evaluation of this movie because I have a very strong nostalgic connection to it. This was easily the DVD I visited most as a kid, the one I rewatched and rewatched and rewatched. But, I mean, there's gotta be a reason for that, right? Kid me had to have been onto something, right? I just have such a love for this era of filmmaking as well. I mean, the nu metal soundtracks, the terrible CGI, the over-the-top action, the terrible romantic subplots, all of these things, when I see them, I can recognize they're objectively bad, but at the same time, it just hits that perfect, sweet little spot for me where it just feels like I'm throwing on a warm blanket and I'm a kid again, baby. And so that could be a reason why this ended so high on the list. You know, when we're talking about early 2000s garbage, this film is easily the king. I mean, Limp Bizkit has a song on this soundtrack. Are you kidding me?
It's just one of those days.
Limp Bizkit, the most memed band of all time, has a song on a Mission Impossible soundtrack. Fred Durst, he's spitting fire.
Biscuit is rocking the set. It's like Russian roulette when you're placing your bet. So don't be upset when you're broke and you're done.
No, he's not, but it's still a pretty banging song. All of these incredibly cheesy early 2000s tropes are only brought up by the absolute insanity of John Woo's filmmaking, okay? You know, John Woo's style, it's flashy, it's in your face, it's over the top, all right? It trades in all of the relatively grounded stuff from the previous movie for over-the-top, stylized gun fu, a la The Matrix, and I love it. It just is so awesome. Again, I could just be preferential towards these kind of movies, but gun fu, man, it's gun fu. Can you argue with gun fu? No, because you got kicked and then shot. That's the power of gun fu, baby. Tom Cruise's performance in this movie, overall, a little bit more edgy, a little bit more of a bad boy. He's got his hair grown out, as you might be able to see. He's wearing slick boy shades. He's wearing a leather jacket, all right? This is not a Tom Cruise you want to mess around with. And he's in love, which is the most important part of this movie. He's got a girl, and he's fighting for her, man. And that's important. You should care about that. Since there's no way around me spoiling this movie for you, how about I instead just give you a bulleted, extensive list of every batshit insane thing that happens in this movie so that you might get an idea of why I hold it in such a high regard. Ethan is introduced in this movie by hanging off of the cliffs looking like Link from fucking Breath of the Wild. IMF, the agency he works for, sends him a message via a rocket launcher. The said message is VR sunglasses with Anthony Hopkins talking in his ear. He then throws the sunglasses and they explode, okay? We then get the Limp Bizkit opening theme song of this movie. Then we get two back-to-back crazy transitions that lead into a salsa tap dance sequence of the film. The music fades just as Tom Cruise makes eye contact with Naya, the love interest, and the music fades and now it's just tapping, furious salsa tapping, and they're staring into each other's eyes, all right? They stare for about 34 seconds. Yes, I counted. Tom Cruise follows her, then they lay hornily in a bathtub in a very awkward scene where they're trying to avoid detection, but they're also like super hot and super into each other, so that's cool, I guess. Apparently, Tom Cruise is working for the guy they're stealing from. Naya gets recruited for a mission, and Tom Cruise and her start doing a flirty speed race in the middle of the street. Hello? A horny race in this movie, okay? And so, as this horny race continues, the two spin out and lock eyes again for another 16 seconds as they're about to fall off of a cliff. As they barely escape death, their car is still dangling from the building. They just start making out while, you know, they're an inch away from death, so that's also epic. The MacGuffin of this film is a deadly flu-like virus, and so I'm just going to skip any of the jokes having to do with the real world implications of that because no one wants to hear it, baby. So Anthony Hopkins has a line in the movie that goes like this: "What? To go to bed with a man and lie to him? She has all the training she needs. She's a woman." I'm sorry, what? Kangaroos, slow-mo scarf catch. Villain explains that he can't live without sex, so he's willing to risk the chance that his lover is only there to entrap him, then cuts off his henchman's pinky with a cigar cutter. There's a line that says, "What are you gonna do, spank me?" Always necessary for a movie. There's a scene where both Ethan and the villain of the movie are doing mask switcheroos, and the villain is disguised as Ethan's character, and Ethan's character is disguised as a guy who died in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and Ethan is trying to gaslight the CEO of a pharmaceutical company that he actually died of the virus of this movie, and I think I'm going too hard. This whole sequence puts the mask count to 3, and we're less than 30 minutes into the movie. What the hell? So we get to one of the more Mission Impossible-esque scenes of the movie, and Ethan Hunt, man, he's doing hair flipping, kick flipping, freaking gun flipping gun fu, and it's flipping freaking awesome, man. This is just gonna ruin the footage, and I don't even care. Then the villain of the movie has a line that says, "You know, woman, mate, they're like monkeys. They want to grab your branch until they swing to the next." You know, whoever wrote this movie, I think, has some seriously unaddressed issues with women that needs to be brought to the table. But anyways, so in the final confrontation, the villain is wearing an all denim suit. Let me say that again, an all denim suit. Yeah, this guy's literally wearing an all denim suit while he plans to sell a deadly virus and literally try to destroy the world. So in the final confrontation, we've got Tom Cruise flip kick, we've got Tom Cruise tactical flip, tactical roll, we've got Tom Cruise slow-mo runs through a flock of doves into a flip kick, we've got Tom Cruise steps through flames with a dove flying in front of him. So from this point in the movie, Tom Cruise, he throws on his 2000s epic cool guy shades, he flip shoots more guys, flip kicks more guys, Tom Cruise drives a motorcycle through an explosion, Tom Cruise does a front wheel Healy spin and explodes a car. After exploding maybe 5 more cars, it's down to Tom Cruise and the villain of the movie to face off on their motorcycles. Probably the best thing to ever happen throughout all of cinematic history. The two drive straight into each other on their motorcycles, jump off of their motorcycles, and punch each other in the air as their motorcycles collide and explode in the air. If that is not the coolest thing to ever happen ever, you're wrong. Okay, you're just wrong. I'm sorry. From there, the two have a hair flippy, kicky battle where they're fighting and they're flipping and they're you know, saying dramatic dialogue, and all of this is intercut with Naya about to kill herself. Tom Cruise finishes off the villain by kicking a gun into the air, grabbing it, flipping, and shooting him like, yo, vanquished your ass, baby. So, you know, the rest of the movie is a bit of a surprise if you want to watch it on your own, but that's just my mostly extensive list of all of the bananas things that happens in this movie. So go watch it for yourself, all right? S tier movie, S tier video already. Let's go. All right, well, after John Woo's masterpiece, after being the highest grossing movie of the year 2000, you know, the team, the Mission Impossible team, was having a hard time following it up. You know, they were like, where do we take the franchise next? What director do we bring on? And I think they did a killer job by following it up with Mission Impossible 3, baby. This film was directed by the, you know, sometimes great, sometimes not so great J.J. Abrams, and I think his style was an absolute fit for this series. I think J.J. Abrams' direction works better for this movie on the whole because the colorful and kind of frantic style that he utilizes, I think, works well with the sort of bombastic yet espionage tone of the franchise. It really does feel like Abrams sort of found the perfect mix of sneaky espionage sequences and bombastic over-the-top action to make this a viable sequel to both of these movies. The action is a little less stylized and it's a little bit more heavy on the sort of tactical spy-like elements sort of presented in the first one, but it's still really epic. But on the same hand, you know, I'm missing my boy John Woo. I'm missing the gun fu. You know, Tom Cruise, he's less edgy in this one. He's living as a sort of suburban hubby. He's left behind his IMF life and he's sort of trying to be a husband and be a sort of functioning member of society, which I do think that is interesting direction to take the character. But again, I just personally have more attachment to edgy bad boy Ethan over suburban hubby Ethan. He's got things to lose in this story, which I think brings the stakes up a little bit in this story, especially more than the last one when the romance wasn't really developed at all. In this one, he's got a wife and they have a good repertoire and you can tell they love each other. But the best character of the film is introduced in the very beginning, and it's not Tom Cruise. It's actually our boy Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's the GOAT. He's the best actor of all time. You can't convince me otherwise. And he is such a good villain in this movie. Yeah, easily the best strength of this movie is Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain. I just cannot get enough of his character. He doesn't get a lot of screen time, but when he is on the screen and when he is interacting with Tom Cruise, he is absolutely chewing the scenery. You know, the other films, they do have villains, but they are not even half as intimidating, half as despicable, and half as memorable as this movie's villain. Rest in peace, Philip Seymour Hoffman. You were an absolute blessing to this franchise. Out of the rotating cast of sort of IMF higher-ups, I think Lawrence Fishburne was also the best choice so far. I think he is also intimidating, but he is also a lot more funny and a lot more charismatic. This is where we get to Simon Pegg's supremacy, all right? The best character, the best reoccurring character, I should say, is introduced in this movie, and that's Simon Pegg as Benji, all right? He is introduced as sort of this low-level IMF guy, one of the guy at a chair type beats, and he's sort of dragged into the plot of this movie sort of reluctantly, and his presence is just so good because Simon Pegg is just one of the most naturally funny people, and the way him and Tom Cruise play off of each other throughout this and the sort of subsequent films is just perfect. Aaron Paul's in this movie. Where my Breaking Bad head's at, my bald head's at. There's like this nightmare fueling eye pop that traumatized me as a kid and even now still kind of scares me, so beware of that. There's this Vatican heist, which is just freaking awesome. It is, again, one of those scenes that almost matches the Langley heist. It's not quite there for me, but it is really, really close. For one, the setting of the heist is really cool. I mean, it's the Vatican. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of cool costume things that they can do, a lot of different character work that they can do in that environment. And they get to experiment with their spy technology a little bit there too, with the whole mask switcheroo. They sort of keep the spy tech stuff a little bit more restrained, and so the scene where you see them use masks, it's a shorter part of the movie and masks don't really play as much of a part, but when you do see them, they're explained and fleshed out more and more important to the narrative overall, and are a lot more memorable to see. Like the way they play around with those sort of vocal strips that change the characters' voices, and so you have, you know, Philip Seymour Hoffman or Tom Cruise doing these voiceovers. Anyways, it's really cool to see the mask use in this movie, and you actually see like Philip Seymour Hoffman doing cool stunts throughout the Vatican and stuff. Just cool stuff that I just really like to see. Little cool, tiny little details. Man, hopefully you guys can't see how sweaty I am right now. Hopefully you guys can't smell me. Alright, so where does Mission Impossible 3 end up on the tier list? Well, that's a good question. Where does it end up? Mission Impossible 3 will end up in the... Mission Impossible 3 ends up in the B tier. Pretty good. Not quite at the level of Mission Impossible 2, but I do think it is an improvement over the original. I think a lot of people also see Mission Impossible 3 as an improvement over Mission Impossible 2, which I can agree with from a more objective standpoint, but I think for my own personal taste, number 3 is in the B tier. So moving into the later half of the Mission Impossible franchise, we got to talk about Brad Bird's installment, Ghost Protocol. Now, I like this one quite a bit because, you know, when I was younger, this was the first Mission Impossible movie I ever got to see in theaters. It was the first one I was really there for. Me and my dad saw it, and I still have really good memories with it. But how does it hold up today? You know, I let nostalgia rule me for number 2, but for this one, I'm gonna be a little bit more critical. You know, if I'm being honest, it's you know, only slightly above average for an action movie, which in the overall Mission Impossible tier list doesn't put it too high. I think that Brad Bird is a good choice for the franchise, not as much as J.J. Abrams or John Woo. You know, he has more comedic beats throughout his movies. You know, if you've seen The Incredibles or Ratatouille, those are very funny movies, and I do think that his sort of levity works well for the franchise when the comedy is good. But when there's a lot more jokes, there's a lot more room for jokes that don't really land, jokes that sort of just end up feeling like filler. And the comedy in this film makes the tone more fun, I would say, but less tense. It doesn't have that sort of nail-biting or heart-pumping action that the other ones quite do, but it does have its moments, don't get me wrong. The directing itself has less stylistic personality than the previous 3, and because I think it's by this point Tom Cruise and sort of the Mission Impossible team had sort of found their footing with the franchise. They'd figure out what works, what doesn't, and they've sort of settled into a more comfortable feeling for these movies, for these last 3, which I sort of miss the experimental sort of crazy phase of the Mission Impossible one, where every single movie was going to be a new director, a new take, and it's something new for the franchise. But nowadays it's sort of more, they've settled in, they know what they're doing, and you're going to get a good movie out of it, but nothing quite as experimental or weird as the previous ones. The plot by these movies is just completely filler. It's just a means to the end to get these spies from point A to point B. There's not really much to latch onto, especially in this movie. The villain is just completely boring, completely forgettable. He looks like Elon Musk, and that's literally the only thing I can remember about him, besides the fact that he wanted to blow up the world with nukes. So not much to go on there, but hey, I'll take what I can get. But there's one scene in this movie that I think does bring it up quite a bit of a notch, and it's probably the one you've seen, and that's the Burj Khalifa scene. The scene where he's climbing on the freaking building like Spider-Man. That is so cool. The way they set it up is really interesting. You know, Benji is talking about these gloves, how they work, and then you see him using the gloves, you see the gloves fail, and you see how Tom Cruise has to work around it, and it's just, it's practically shot, so it just looks really amazing, and you just get such a good sense of scale, like he's on the tallest building in the world and he's climbing it with just these sticky gloves, and it's really nail-biting, really intense, really awesome. You know, the sort of IMF cast in this movie isn't amazing in my opinion. I think that Jane Carter, played by Paula Patton, is alright. Her backstory isn't interesting to me, and the way her character sort of interacts with the other characters seems pretty like standard, but I do like Jeremy Renner. Hawkeye's in this movie, and the way Hawkeye is playing off of Tom Cruise is actually pretty good. I was surprised because normally Jeremy Renner, he's sort of just there, but he actually had a good playoff with Tom Cruise. So where does Ghost Protocol land on the tier list? That's a great question, audience. Where does it land? Where? So Ghost Protocol ends up in the D tier, which for a standard action movie, I'd say it's pretty good, but again, in the pantheon of Mission Impossible films, you know, it's just above being the bare minimum, in my opinion. Moving on to Rogue Nation. Now, this one, I don't really have any connection to. It wasn't super memorable to me. And that's never a good sign. When I can't remember much of what happened in a movie, that's probably a sign that nothing memorable happened in the movie. Didn't even think I'd seen it before until I started watching it, and I was like, oh yeah, I have seen this before. You know, this one has similar issues to Ghost Protocol, but more, in my opinion. More comedic beats, which again can be nice when the jokes land, but when they don't, it it ends up feeling like filler again. Simon Pegg, though, again, he's the best mainstay. He's the best part of this movie, in my opinion. The plot is just extremely tired. Tom Cruise is going rogue in like every damn movie at this point, and it's really just feeling like a repetition, which again makes for fine, you know, fun, entertaining movies when you watch them, but it doesn't give you much of an impression after the fact. The stakes of this movie are just completely undefined. It's more of just a cat and mouse game between Tom Cruise and this scary syndicate, which, you know, it can be fun in its own right, but again, for a spy movie, for a impossible mission, there should be something at stake here other than, oh no, what if a spy dies? Or something, you know? Like, Ghost Protocol, at least that movie had nuclear freaking war going for it. This one doesn't really leave you much. Sean Harris, who recently played King Arthur in the Green Knight film, he was a pretty good choice for the villain. Not quite as memorable, not even close actually, to Philip Seymour Hoffman, but you know, you get the sense that he is evil, you get the sense that he wants to do harm to people, and so, you know, the audience wants to see him get taken down by a good old Tom Cruise. The sort of double agent / femme fatale aspect of this movie didn't quite work for me. It's just one of the more forgettable aspects. Overall, it's just the constant intrigue of whose side is she on, what choice is she gonna make. It seems like it would be fun and interesting, but just for this franchise, it doesn't really work, especially considering that her and Tom Cruise don't really have the most authentic chemistry. To me, they just sort of feel like actors to me when I'm watching them interact in a scene. Tom Cruise is starting to seem a little bit bored in these movies. That could just be me, or they could just be trying to present Ethan Hunt as sort of more of a beat down, sort of tired agent who's been doing this for a lot longer. But it just seems like Tom Cruise doesn't have the same oomph in his acting so much anymore. But the stunt work is still really cool, don't get me wrong. I like that. But I also like to see the more charismatic, the more aloof and handsome aspects of Tom Cruise's personality in a movie. You know what I mean? I wanna bang him. I want I want to bang Tom Cruise in a Tom Cruise movie, if you know what I mean. I want him to be excited and crazy and off the wall, and I want to bang him. But yeah, talking about the stunts in this movie, the opening plane stunt, it's insane. It's awesome. The theater sequence also is really cool. There's a lot of cool set design and the moving theater set. I think the worst sequence in any Mission Impossible movie is in this movie, though. It's the water safe heist. It's this underwater safe they have to crack into, and it's another one of those moments that's too reliant on special effects, get as invested in the scene when so much of it looks digital. And the best scenes in the movie are obviously going to be the ones where Tom Cruise is really about to die filming some crazy shit. So it's still not too bad, though, which I think speaks for the quality of the franchise, though. And it's not just the CGI in that scene that bothers me either. The techno lab locale, just there's nothing interesting going on with that set piece. And it's just, again, the characters involved in this sequence don't have the greatest chemistry with each other. But the scene that follows this directly up is this car chase where Tom Cruise had just been revived from the verge of death, and he has to do this insane car chase. And that scene is really cool because the comedic timing of it works great, because it's still a tense situation where you want to see the characters get out of it, but they introduce comedy in a realistic but still funny way, where Tom Cruise is dazed, he barely knows what's going on, but he's still in Mission Impossible mode. And so that makes for a really different but still engaging and still funny scene. And so I really give it to that scene. It's a good scene. The twist villain stuff is lame, but who cares about the plot anyways. The end with Benji being rigged to a bomb, that was one of the tense moments for me, because Simon Pegg plays the best character in the movie. I don't want to see him die. Save him. The ending sort of climactic face-off between the villain and Ethan Hunt's crew is not great. They sort of just end it by trapping him in a glass box, which is sort of anticlimactic. You want to see something crazy to end on, and they're just like, wow, we trapped you in a glass box. You're done now. So Rogue Nation ends up in the F tier. If you're watching all of these movies in one sitting and you decide to skip one, let it be that one. But moving on to fill the last space of the tier list, A, what is it going to be?
Intermission. Bo's been talking too much.
Cute cat. So, we started at the beginning, now we're at the end, talking about Mission Impossible Fallout. Now, to give you a sense of the scale that this series, this franchise has reached, Tom Cruise broke his leg and it cost the studio $80 million. Okay? One of Tom Cruise's appendages is worth $80 million now to this film studio, all because of Mission Impossible. And I think that just leads in so nicely to talk about the most recent installment. So with this one, they're going the nuclear war route again, which they've already done it in Ghost Protocol, but it's technically a repeat. But I think it's an overall better movie, so who gives a rip? Not me. The plot writing is still incredibly weak, but in this movie it takes more backseat to the action, which I like. The only thing really guiding the plot is what would make for cool action, cool set pieces, and you know, that works for me in a franchise all about action set pieces. There's literally a point in the film where Tom Cruise's character says, CIA, apostles, what difference does it make? They're literally acknowledging now within the film universe that the plot doesn't mean a single fucking thing, and it's all about having fun, which I just really appreciate. So why do we have to keep on seeing Alec Baldwin as this IMF higher up? I don't like him in this franchise. I can't exactly say why. It's just not interesting to me at all. But they got Henry Cavill on for this one. Superman is now in the Mission Impossible franchise, which is awesome. You know, Henry Cavill, he's a great action actor. He's got the build for it, and he's got the sort of charismatic, fun personality that I think just fits right in with Tom Cruise. And his character in this movie is really good, and it's actually sort of really simple how good it is, because he is more of a brute force operative, and Tom Cruise's character is more of a sort of sneaky spy guy, and so the way their tactics sort of clash against each other is incredibly interesting. Not only that, you know, he's constantly questioning Tom Cruise's character's decisions throughout the film. He's constantly sort of challenging him, and he ends up being the twist villain of this movie, which was predictable, but, you know, obviously I think makes for a good action sort of spy twist, because, you know, he's introduced very early on in the film, and he's in the film throughout most of it, and so when he is revealed to be a twist villain, even though you see it coming, it still is fleshed out. It stinks that Jeremy Renner couldn't make it for this one. I actually liked him as a mainstay for the franchise, surprisingly enough, but he wasn't in this one, unfortunately, so this film gets deducted 10 points from that. This one mostly just feels the closest to a full throttle action thrill ride to Mission Impossible 2. It feels the closest to that one in spirit, and that's probably why I like it second to Mission Impossible. The plane jump sequence is very epic. One little detail I noticed that made a big difference for me is when they switch to the IMAX aspect ratio, you actually see the letterbox in the screen sort of fade away like this, rather than just cutting to the IMAX footage, which is again a very, very small detail, but it helps you to sort of immerse yourself in the scale and the absolute insanity of the situation, because you're seeing the borders of the film fade away and you're just in the situation. It's almost like removing the fourth wall, and it's like you're there, and I love that. And then the bathroom scene is right after that, and that scene's also cool. That's probably the footage you've seen of Henry Cavill going like boom, and like loading his fists as he goes to punch him, which is like really cool. And it's just, they take full advantage of all of the set pieces. Like in the bathroom scene, they're like destroying the walls, breaking the mirrors, breaking the doors. They have people come in and interrupt the action and make for a tense moment. So there's all these interesting and engaging ways that they're using the set pieces, and they're using these sort of narrative beats to actually enhance all of the action of the film, which cool. And the action in this movie in general is just so much better presented than some of the previous ones, because they're using better choreography, wider cinematography, and longer takes so that you can actually see the action that's happening. And on top of that, they're using the set design to really sell the power and sell the force behind all of these hits, and it just looks so dang awesome every time, baby. Oh yeah. I mean, even down to the sound design, they make it so slick. There's a scene where a motorcycle is driving between these pillars, and you hear the whiz of the pillars, but as the motorcycle is going faster, it's like boom, 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 boom. And it's all these small little details that help like make you feel like you're in the action, and that's the point of a movie, right? It's to feel immersed in a situation and to be able to live vicariously through it. And this movie, I think, uses all of its advantages to really almost perfect the Mission Impossible formula. And you know, this movie does the impossible. It actually manages to make a Tom Cruise running scene be engaging and funny. You know what? Enough talk. We know where this movie ends up in the tier list. If you haven't seen already, what are you doing? Okay, watch Mission Impossible Fallout. I'm gonna put it on the tier list right now. Fallout, baby. All right, there it is, the completed tier list. That's what we're going with. So at the S tier, we got Mission Impossible 2. In the A tier, we got Mission Impossible Fallout. In the B tier, we got Tom Cruise Mission Impossible Mission Impossible 3. In the C tier, we've got Mission Impossible. In the D tier, we've got Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And in the F tier, we've got Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. You know, if you disagree with this tier list, give me heat in the comments, all right? Tear me to shreds. And if you know a Mission Impossible fan who, you know, has got some strong opinions, some strong hot takes, you know, send them this video and really piss them off. But either way, I hope you enjoyed, and if you want to see more content similar to this, drop a subscribe.
Hot Anya, don't get any Anya.
And with that being said,
bitch lasagna. What is it?
With that being said, everyone, hasta lasagna. Don't get any Anya. Have a good day.